All right, we'll let a few people stream in here. Just started it. There's a few people starting to watch. So I want to welcome everybody back to one of our CR YouTube panel shows. We've got in your upper right corner Nate Madden, who has the Capitol Hill brief over at CRTV. Lower left is Rob Eno, who does WTF MSN, and then Chris Pandolfo, staff writer at Conservative Review. Obviously, the big thing today is the cloture vote on Brett Kavanaugh that just sort of it wrapped up earlier, but we had the Susan Collins speech, who was kind of the prime event, the main show, if you will. And she said she's going to vote yes, along with Joe Manchin and Jeff Flake. That puts the vote count for Brett Kavanaugh over the top. And so, not withstanding any sort of crazy last-minute circus acts, which, of course, have been going on the whole time here, we're going to see tomorrow at some point Brett Kavanaugh confirmed, or at least the Senate give their advice and consent. So let's talk about that. Let's jump right off the bat. I mean, Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, Lindsey Graham, these are the names, these are the people who are sort of the heroes of the moment, if you will. And if you'd pay me $1,000 to take that bet at the start of this, I would have not said yes, even though knowing that they were sort of the ones that were on the edge. Nate, let's go to you. You were kind of there all week. What was the most surprising thing to you that you saw, heard, or kind of transpired?
I mean, 14 million different timelines, and this is the only one where the Avengers defeat Thanos. But, it's just the weirdest, the most surprising thing was Collins' speech, just because, and I think that the build up to that led to a lot of it. And not a lot of people expected her to come out as strong as she did. I mean, she was there. She spoke for almost 45 minutes, and she categorically addressed every single one of the talking points that was put up against her. She's no firebrand orator, but the content was solid.
Right. In Rob, I mean, you tracked the media. The media kind of at the end of the Collins speech was there, but I mean, what surprised you leading into today, and even during or after? I mean, what's the most surprising thing that kind of comes out of today for you?
The most surprising thing is that the media has absolutely no morals, no scruples. They will do whatever they need to say in order to get their way and to paint the narrative that they want to paint. The biggest one for me today was this New York Times op-ed writer who said that Chuck Grassley and Donald Trump were saying that George Soros helps fund the protests that are going on, which is demonstrably true.
Yeah.
Means that they're anti-Semitic. So I looked at the New York Times, and I know we're trying to keep this quick, but shortly, the New York Times said that, George Soros isn't paying for these exact protests, and this woman says that she wasn't paid by Soros to protest, but she works for an organization as the executive director making $150,000 a year that's funded by George Soros's Open Society Foundation that George Soros transferred $18 billion of his wealth to.
And see, this is this AstroTurf thing, right? This is straight up AstroTurf. Almost everything that we've seen for the last 2 or 3 weeks through this has been AstroTurf. A lot of these folks have been bussed in. They've been brought in from other parts of the country. If they haven't been outright paid, they've been bussed in. They've been given meals. They've been told how to do this. There's been a coordinated effort behind this. This is AstroTurf, right? And this is something that the Tea Party movement got accused of doing all the friggin' time with the Kochs. But the minute you turn it around on George Soros, when it's demonstrably happening and demonstrably true, it's anti-Semitic. It's horse crap.
My email is WTF and you know what WTF stands for. And as Chris can tell you, earlier in the office, I was screaming the title of the email.
Right.
Because let me recap this. Until they changed the story, the original title of the story was "Without Evidence, Trump Said Something." That's, the New York Times and the media's great thing that they always want to say is "without evidence." Well, after they found the evidence, changed their story, didn't put an editorial note on it, they said that Trump said it, and they said it's still wrong because George Soros, while he funds the panoply, all of these organizations almost, that are part of this movement, that are paying for the signs, So George Soros is funding an organization that then pays for the science for this, which is what Donald Trump said, and which is demonstrably true. All you got to do is, follow the money from the Open Society's website. It's not like they're keeping this as some big conspiracy. It's what they do. But when you say that, you're a nut, you're a conspiracy theorist, and weirdly, you're anti-Semitic because George Soros happens to be Jewish. I just don't get where these people come from. I do, because they need to lie. They need to tell the story that they think is the story to get people to believe it. It's absolutely insane. I may be a little fired up, as you can tell.
Yeah. And not just that. I mean, that's the thing. So you had these I want to be careful when I say coordinated effort, because it sounds as if the DNC or some organization is calling the shots on what the news is doing in terms of their political hit jobs. And that may or may not be the case. But what you definitely have is writers, commentators who have thrown objective, everything out the window, and they're completely subjective. And to some degree, that's okay. We're political commentators. We're CRTV, we're Conservative Review, whether you work at NRO or wherever, that's one thing. But when you're the New York Times and you're trying to call balls and strikes, and you paint the ball as if, well, that's a ball, but it was fast enough and it should have been a strike. I mean, you're not being an umpire then. Now you're being a color commentator. And that's the thing. I mean, we've lost all of that. And that gets me to my question that I want to ask Chris. Chris, do you think that this changes what's going to happen in a month? I mean, we saw the blue wave, and it was starting to scare a lot of us. And all of a sudden, in the course of the last 5 or 6 days, really the last week, you've seen a pretty drastic change in some races, haven't you?
Well, yeah, you do definitely see a Kavanaugh bump in some of the polling. That does suggest that Republican voters who may have been turned off throughout the election process, maybe they're more center-right people who don't really like President Trump that much. Maybe they're never Trumpers, and they were going to stay home so the Democrats could punish Trump for being Trump. They realize that the Democrats suck and are evil, and they shouldn't be in power. And so now that maybe they're going to come vote, and that'll counteract some of that. But it's really difficult to kind of map this out. There's just so many unknowns that are going into the next month. And the big thing, too, is we have Kavanaugh is going to be confirmed tomorrow. That's set in stone. Nothing's going to change unless they have a picture of him raping somebody.
Stop.
Right.
Stop right there. You go outside right now. You turn around 3 times and spit. You do not jinx the process.
Not jinx. You guys always say I jinx stuff. The process is not going to
jinx
okay?
stuff every
It's going to be confirmed tomorrow. And then the issue is, does this go away? Do the Democrats, are they smart enough to just drop Kavanaugh and go back to attacking Trump and trying to appeal some of those GOP voters who are activated back and maybe put them back to sleep? Or does their base go super crazy, refuse to let this go, attack Susan Collins in the street, and just demonstrate that they are so radical, so unhinged, so insane and evil that they cannot be allowed to govern ever? If that happens, and I think that's what's most likely to happen, I think you're going to see this GOP momentum survive throughout October. And then based on whether or not President Trump does something stupid, more or less, you're going to see whether it can survive into Election Day or whether it'll peter out. I am optimistic. I think it's going to survive to Election Day. I still think the Republicans are likely to lose the House of Representatives, but I think we're going to pick up a lot of Senate seats, and I don't think it's going to be as bad as it could have been if the election were held 2 months ago.
Okay, now here's a question that I debated with somebody earlier, actually Daniel Horowitz from Conservative Review, who is one of the most prolific writers when it comes to these sorts of things, especially on the courts. He has a book, he has a podcast, The Conservative Conscience, where he talks about this sort of thing all the time. And I said, let me throw you a kind of a curveball question, Daniel. Would it be better for conservatives, not Republicans, but true kind of principled conservatives, if really we lose the House? I mean, if this ends up pushing us over the top, and the reason I ask that is we saw something coalesce here that is, I mean, shocking. Again, Lindsey Graham, you have libertarians and conservatives, jokingly, but to some degree seriously saying, what? I love Lindsey Graham now. What? I love Susan Collins. And it's because you would never expect these sorts of things to happen. Sure, they might once in a while come to bat on an issue and, hit a home run, but these are like bottom of the ninth clutch hits. I mean, what Susan Collins did was literally, factually, systematically, in the course of 45 minutes, tear down this entire thing that happened, from the press to the dirty Dems on the side that were literally playing this as a game, to the people who leaked the Ford thing, and even to some degree Ford herself, by maybe either exaggerating or allowing herself to be played as a political pawn to whatever degree she did. Again, I stand by the fact I think something happened to her. I don't know if Kavanaugh was around when it happened, how much he knew her, or, I just don't know, because there have been no facts. But that doesn't take away from the fact that she got used by some of the Democrats in this process. That said, who stands to lose the most here? And I think right now it's definitely the Democrats. But who's next?
I'm going to jump in for a double answer here, because I think if the Republicans lose the House of Representatives, that's not going to be best for conservatives. And what you're seeing right now with the lionization of Susan Collins and Lindsey Graham, that's really not good for conservatives either. It's not as if these people have had some road to Damascus moment where the scales have fallen from their eyes. Now they see the Democrats for what they really are. No, that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is we have a bunch of senators like Lindsey Graham who are running for re-election in 2020, and they're preemptively positioning themselves to be safe from a primary challenge because they fought on Kavanaugh. And you have Susan Collins, who really, she made a great speech. Don't get me wrong, the content was solid. But that's a speech that should have been status quo for any Republican in the United States Senate, dismantling these outrageous allegations to the Democrats and their smear tactics and their evil behavior. Every Republican should be doing what Susan Collins should have been doing. That's not something we should say is a heroic effort. It's something that should have been expected of everyone as a bare minimum.
Nate, what were you saying there?
They pretty much have been all week on the floor. Susan Collins' speech was an amalgamation of most of the stuff that we've seen from floor speeches and press conferences since this stuff dropped. The surprising thing was that it was Susan Collins actually regurgitating these points, and then making some points of her own. She did make some points of her own, but they were specifically tailored to her own concerns about Roe v. Wade and Obamacare and all the non-conservative things that she loves and wants to save.
And my point is the bar has been lowered so much that conservatives are excited because Susan Collins did something that should have been acceptable or should have been expected from every single Republican. But so what happens if the Democrats take control of the House of Representatives is we're going to get 2 years of, hey, we have to stop Nancy Pelosi. We got to stop this agenda. What we're not going to talk about is actually achieving conservative things. And we saw this with the budget bill that they just passed before the Kavanaugh sexual misconduct allegations came through, or during that whole hearing process. Is the media and conservative commentators were all focused on what's happening to Kavanaugh, and none of us were focusing on how President Trump signed a spending bill that funded zero of his immigration priorities and didn't achieve conservative policies, and we ignored what the Congress was doing. And so if we lose the House of Representatives, we're going to get 2 years of we have to stop Pelosi and the Democrats, and we're not going to get any conservative policies. And this cycle is just going to repeat itself.
And I would agree. Like I said, it was a thought experiment, definitely. I mean, Rob, have you seen anyone talking in the press about the fact that these people have done this and as if they're going to stay any which way close to what they are? Specifically people like Graham, Collins. I mean, the two vote so closely together. But I mean, it's easy to mess up, right? I mean, but we're sort of ignoring what was the big story this morning before Collins went on her soapbox, which was Murkowski. Murkowski voted no on cloture, which, yes, it's a procedural move, but we know that in a situation like this, that the cloture vote was uber important because they would have filibustered. And so the question becomes, what Chris just said is, these people have done what they did because they're up for re-election. But you had Murkowski, who, granted, she's not up for re-election until 2022, but she did what she did. And so that's what you expected out of someone like a Collins. I mean, at least I did. So why do you think Murkowski did what she did?
I think Murkowski did what she did because she doesn't care. She knows that nobody can. Sorry to I'm going to trigger Joe here. She knows that you can primary her, you can win the primary, and she'll just use some arcane Alaska law to run in the to run in the general election anyways. I mean, we've gone there before. We tried to make her pay, and it didn't work. So all of the threats that we're going to make you pay and you will lose your job and you won't be able to do that. Remember, Collins has elected as the governor in Maine a pretty, populist. I'm not going to call him, completely conservative, but a Trumpian populist in LePage, who's elected statewide. And if she didn't do that, there's the chance that LePage might have run against her. There was talk that LePage's wife might have run against her. You know what I mean? So she knows that in order to keep her paycheck coming, and that's what matters to politicians. Okay. Politicians don't react to praise. Politicians react to pain. And the pain was going to be too hard for Susan Collins. So she did this.
Let's put it on paper then. We'll go around. We'll go Nate, Chris, Rob, and then myself. Briefly, does Murkowski get, if she runs again, because she is, older and there's a lot of question if she will, but if she runs again, does she get primaried from somebody on the right?
Not successfully.
And what do you mean by that? That even if she loses?
We have to understand as conservatives in general for the last 4 years, really, 2016 going into 2018 now, and probably in 2020, they're just not paying attention to primaries. Murkowski was just up for a re-election in 2016. Joe Miller ran against her as a third-party candidate. There were 2 leftist candidates because it was a 4-guy race. There were 4 people running in that election. And Joe Miller had no support as the Libertarian candidate. He still polled within 15 points of defeating Lisa Murkowski. She only got 44% of the vote, and she won. And so if you had conservative efforts and momentum and energy put into that race, if Fox News had endorsed Joe Miller, if Mitch McConnell had said, I don't agree with Joe Miller on everything, but at least he's going to vote for my nominees, they might have been able to knock Lisa Murkowski out, and they didn't. So we've demonstrated over and over again that people are not interested specifically in primarying her successfully. So I just don't foresee anything changing in the future.
The other thing to remember here is that people have incredibly, incredibly short political memories.
Yes.
We are talking about a span of time between 2018 and 2022. And if you think people won't get political amnesia between now and then, I've got some exciting real estate opportunities to discuss with you. But that's a long sort of. People are going to forget about this. Like that's going to fade away. And even if there does come, even if that does happen, it's like Rob said, it's like you experienced firsthand on that campaign. If there is a successful primary, they're not going to be successful in the general.
Right.
For all we know, we could have a Democratic president in 2022. Trump's not shooing for re-election, so
that too.
Breaking news: Susan Rice, the former ambassador,
Dirty Rice,
left the Benghazi people to die. Susan Rice has answered Jen Psaki, who is part of Clinton Inc., who wants to run for Senate in Maine. There will be an army of supporters with you. And Susan Rice said, me. So Susan Rice is talking about going and running against.
Yeah, and Laura Ingraham said maybe she should primary Murkowski today. So
yeah, and I was about to get to that. So that's interesting breaking news. I mean, so when I was up in Alaska in 2010, I saw firsthand that you know, I don't want to rehash what 2010 and the Tea Party was, but I think you're right. The short political memories. I mean, right after Murkowski voted no and that news broke, the entire Twitter feed that I was watching was, we need to primary Murkowski. And most of them didn't know. And it was because, one, Alaska's far away, and even though that was a big story at the time, it's a short political memory of people in America when it's not your state and it's not that close to you. And in a place like Maine, I mean, if we got a Susan Rice from Maine and she took out somebody like Susan Collins, at the end of the day, outside of a vote like this, you wouldn't notice or know that there was much different in the terms of the votes. So the question becomes is, what can we do as conservatives to sort of grab onto this lightning, if there is any lightning in the bottle, and keep it beyond November? And can we even hold on to it until the midterms in a month to get, to push back against the blue wave? I mean, and again, let's go around and we'll go starting with Rob. Rob, do you think that the Republicans hold the Senate, and is there any chance of them holding the House?
The Republicans are going to hold the Senate. I don't think there's any chance that the Democrats are going to do that, based on the way that the polling has been moving. And I think that people are going to stay energized. I think people, I said it earlier today, people who have a good job, who are doing better under the Trump administration, who, maybe decided that, I'm not really going to pay that close attention to politics. We got Trump elected. Everything's doing well. That's okay. This has jolted them. This has brought them back to the table. And I don't know if that's going to work for the House, but I think it's a heck of a lot more probable today than it was 3 days ago or even a week ago that we keep the House. I mean, if you look at 538 does a tracker, right, of the House races. 538's tracker went from 80.7 on Sunday night. 80.7% of the Democrats
for the House.
The Democrats would take the House. It was down around 75 3 days later on Wednesday.
Nate, I see you.
The polling is showing a shift. I don't know if it's going to last till Election Day. We'll see. But there's definitely a chance that the GOP keeps the House.
Nate, you were nodding along. I mean, do you
That's my thinking. If there is lightning in the bottle, the conservatives and Republicans, they're going to have to take a page from Saul Alinsky on this one. Pick the target, personalize it, polarize it, and cut it off from sympathy. He's right. This has jolted people out of this quasi comatose state that even if they're doing well and they've gotten a better job or they've gotten a raise at work and all this other stuff, but they don't know if they're going to go to the polls. This has woken up a lot of people. And it's a lot, truth be told, electorally, it's a lot easier to message on a loss than on a win. It's a lot easier to maintain anger for 4 weeks than it is to maintain satisfaction and a celebration. But if there is anything to be found here, I think that just taking what went on, this intergalactic freak show, as Senator Kennedy called it, and just hanging this process like a millstone around their necks from now until November is the best way to squeeze that lightning out of that bottle.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. And Chris, I mean, is there anything different that they haven't said that you think that this does or doesn't do for Republicans? I mean,
look, I think Republicans are really activated in red states where places like Missouri and Montana and North Dakota, where you have Democratic senators from red states. I think those guys are gone. But in terms of the House of Representatives, I think there's just too many retirements. There's not enough money being spent, and most of the people you're going to see lose are in blue states like California, New York, parts of Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. North Carolina is more of a purple state, but those are where the House races that are going to matter are still in the Democrat column, still in the Democrats' favor. And you have to be realistic. They only need 23 seats to take the majority, and there's about 40 or 50 of seats in play right now.
Right.
The odds are strongly in favor of the Democrats taking over the House of Representatives. I'm not saying that nothing can change between now and November, but it's an entire month. We don't know what kind of political surprises are going to happen, and we don't know who's going to be dumbest last. So,
give me a number, Chris. If you think the Democrats take the House, how many seats do you think they go plus?
Anywhere from 5 to 15, 20 if they have a good.
Way to zero in on a number there. Really going on the ledge.
I mean, historically, it's a 31 seat shift, right? So if you just do the historic trend, they end up around a 10 seat majority.
10
just roughly estimating.
Okay, so you got 10. Nate, where are you?
So my overall bet on this is going to be the GOP maintaining a 2 to 5 seat majority
in the House.
In the House, maintaining a 2 to 5 seat majority is my bet. If the Democrats take anything, they're going to come in under 5. I think we're going to get raised if any either way.
Okay, and Rob, where are you?
I'm right where Nate is. It's going to be a handful of seats on either side that there will be a majority on it. And by a handful, I mean a handful of seats on either side of the 217 and a half. So anywhere from 222 to 222 for the other side. So
I mean, if we were on a game show, I would go above you guys because you all went low, but I'm right where Rob and Nate are. I think at this point, looking at some of the races, looking at some of the polling, I use some just anecdotally, and I see it. I've seen a shift, a big shift into margin of error on a lot of those. So for those of you that don't poll watch, the thing about it is when you've got like let's say a 47-41 sort of poll that comes out that's like for a Democrat in a seat that's currently Republican, and that drops back into like a 40-39 or 44-39, while there's still a 5 point, it goes from like a 6 or 7 to a 5 point. The thing is, you drop into that margin of error and all of a sudden it completely changes. It goes from, like a 1 or 2 point swing to actually something more like a 4 to 5 point. And that's getting a little wonky, but my point is I've seen that starting to happen, and I wouldn't have said this even maybe until today. I mean, I don't want to sound like a Lisa Murkowski here, but I came into this podcast thinking that the Dems still have it, but I'm wondering if maybe this does. A person like Susan Collins, a person like Lindsey Graham, they do these things, they're calculating, and they're going to be loud enough to do it. Guys, we've talked here for about 25 minutes. As we know, like it or not, most people don't watch to the end, but we're getting more viewers. I just want to thank you guys for coming on. We're doing this more for those of you that are watching, or maybe you're going to skip to the end. Appreciate it. Share this around. Make sure you subscribe. I'm going to steal a page out of Steve Deace's book here. Steve Deace, his show on CRTV. They always do these bold predictions. As we go into the weekend, we'll start with you, Chris. What's your bold prediction for the weekend?
Kavanaugh's going to be confirmed on Saturday. So Lisa Murkowski was kind of wavering after she voted no on cloture, whether or not she was actually going to vote no on Kavanaugh tomorrow. And I think there's a chance she actually might vote yes with pressure from Collins and other Republicans. So that's
pretty
my
bold.
prediction.
Lisa Murkowski voting yes on the nod. Rob, what about you? What's your bold prediction?
My bold prediction is that Donald Trump goes to Senator Daines' daughter's funeral and takes him back on Air Force One.
Wedding. You can't call weddings funerals.
Wedding.
That gets us all into trouble. All right, so on the next panel, Rob will be replaced by a woman because we clearly need some feminine influence here. Oh man, I didn't even say it, and I'm going to get in trouble for that. Nate, your bold prediction, aside from the fact that one of us is no longer with us.
I don't have anything that bold. I mean, I guess I got to knock on wood as I say this, but this thing seems like it's going to roll forward as expected at this point, unless something else happens. And I'm knocking on wood. I'll go outside and I'll turn around and spit and do all that. But I guess if I had to make any prediction, I would predict that Daines is probably going to have at least 2 pieces of cake at that wedding reception since he gets to stay now.
Yeah,
he gets to stay now with the vote count. So.
Yeah, I think that was kind of played around a little bit, maybe for emotional for some of the people who are voting. Like, if you're on the fence, don't make Daines come back. Like, do this. My bold prediction is sort of in the same vein, that nothing happens, that he gets confirmed and it goes away, and then the next story comes up. We've been sitting on this for a while now, and I think that the press and everybody who was hoping for this sort of big collapse and the Kavanaugh no, and then who's the next person, I think that's it. I think it's over, and they're going to move on because they need new clicks, and this isn't going to bring it to them. Guys, thanks for staying with me. Appreciate it, and can't wait for you guys to join me again next time.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for having us
Rock
on, man.
on.